Yeah.
Okay.
Hold on. So let's try again. Oh, it is streaming live. Okay, here we go. Is it? Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Perla Martinez. I am the DEI Administrator for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. I am so happy that you are joining us today where we are having a very exciting conversation about Refugee Week, which is celebrated every June 17th to June 23rd. And June 20th is World Refugee Day. So in the spirit of that, we have the two very exciting guests with us here today, and I would let them introduce themselves. Nadia?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nadia Kasvin, and I am a co-founder and director of Us Together.
Hola, bienvenidos. Guadalupe Velasquez, Managing Director of Welcoming City, which is a department of Us Together.
Okay, and we will have a PowerPoint presentation for all of you, and then we will have a commentary on it from Nadia and Guadalupe. So I will begin sharing that screen. Let's see. There we go. And Nadia, you can go ahead and start. Or whoever's going first.
Yeah, Pearl, are you going to do slideshow?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, welcome to our presentation, A Refugee Journey. Next slide.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nadia.
Okay. You know, I want to introduce our organization, Us Together. And really, the name says it all. Together, we can make the world better. Who we are, and we are now on the third slide. Perla. Us Together was founded in 2003 in response to the growing needs of refugees and immigrants in Central Ohio. And since then, we've been providing integration services along the way of social integration, economic integration, civic integration, and linguistic integration. What sets us apart is that we are a mutual assistance agency founded by refugees for refugees. Our organization was founded by former refugees and is still managed by former refugees. We expanded rapidly across the state of Ohio. In 2008, we opened our second office in Cleveland, and in 2013, our third office in Toledo. In 2016, we founded Welcoming City, social enterprise of Us Together, and you will later hear from Guadalupe Velasquez, the managing director of Welcoming City. Next slide. I will be talking about immigration statuses. Yes, it is a refugee, it's the week honoring world refugees. But the lines between all these different immigration statuses are blurred. And so not all people who receive other statuses might not have been refugees. It just so happened that they came here with different refugee statuses. Obviously, these are not all of them, but I want to concentrate on these three statuses because I do believe that people that come through these statuses often share the same characteristics as refugees entering the country. and this is escaping persecution. So I will be talking about the status of humanitarian parole, asylum seeker, and refugee. Next slide, please. Status of humanitarian parole has not been used that much until several years ago. And usually it is just, kind of an alternative status when people do not meet technical requirements for other various visa programs and other statuses, then they are granted temporary entry by the Attorney General due to humanitarian reasons. There should be significant public benefit, and it's reviewed on case-by-case basis. And once that reason for humanitarian parole doesn't exist anymore, people with this status might return back to their country. They also have to have a sponsor in the United States. But in the last several years, this particular immigration status was used to bring in evacuees from Afghanistan and Ukrainians escaping the war in Ukraine. Those two particular groups probably most likely would have been also qualified for a refugee status, but for various reasons they did not receive status of refugee, though they were escaping. In the case of Afghans, escaping persecution from Taliban. In the case of Ukrainians, escaping the war. This particular program, this particular status does not allow for public benefits, but special considerations were made for Afghan evacuees and residents of Ukraine, who, depending on the date of arrival, can access public benefits for a short period of time. Next one. So by the end of 2023, 76,000 Afghans and more than 150,000 Ukrainians received humanitarian parole. And it's temporary status, good for 2 years, and needs to adjust. People need to adjust the status to be able to stay permanently in the United States. And so we've been working with Afghans and Ukrainians to help them to extend their parole status or file for temporary protective status or for asylum status, which we will be talking next. The next status is asylum. People always ask, what is the difference between refugees and asylees? The difference is in process. To apply for asylum status, people have to be present, physically present in the United States. They have or seek admission at the port of entry, and they have to demonstrate that they are afraid to return to their native land because of past persecution. They have to demonstrate a well-founded fear of persecution upon return to their country of origin. And persecution is based on religion, nationality, political opinion, race, or membership in a particular social group. Next one. And now we are talking about refugee. This is the definition from 1951 Refugee Convention. And just like for asylum seekers, it's based only on 5 reasons of persecution. Should we adjust that? It's been a while. Yes, unfortunately, human race does not stand still and comes up with all kinds of different ways to persecute people and torture people, imprison people. And probably they're most likely, and we actually see it from stories we hear from refugees every day, that there are more ways that they are being persecuted. But right now, a legal refugee status in the United States is based on this definition. Refugee is someone who owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion outside of their country of nationality and are unable to, or due to fear, unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country. Next one. So you see the definitions really the same for refugees and asylees. It's persecution, but the procedures are different. For asylees, people have to be present in the United States. They have to be on a U.S. soil. All the processing of refugee status happens outside of the United States. And when people come through one of our ports of entry, they already have all the legal paperwork done. They are authorized to work upon arrival. They're entirely legal. They are fully vetted. And actually, people with refugee status are probably the most vetted immigrants in the United States. So let's talk about the path of refugees. What's happening there? What journey looks like? Next one. People flee, refugees flee persecution in their country of origin. And, their refugee status is determined in their host country. Very often it's a neighboring country that they are able to run to for safety. It's not that, they receive legal status in that first country where they found safety. But if they turn to a United Nations High Commission of Refugee and submit their case of persecution to United Nations, that if that case is approved, they will receive a world refugee status, they will receive their world refugee number, and in many countries, United Nations would also help them with their immediate protection and with some food assistance. But again, not in all countries, because unfortunately, in the last decades, the number of refugees around the world tripled. United Nations has very limited funds to spend on assisting so many refugees around the world. So when United Nations, and by the way, we will be talking about numbers on the next slide, but when United Nations is looking at all these refugees that they have registered, they're looking at long-term durable solution. Can people repatriate to their country of origin? If conditions approve, some do go back to their country, but some are displaced for decades and some can never go back. Local integration, can they stay in that first country? Very, very few people can. And then finally, if those two don't work, it's a resettlement in a third country. And so when we talk about refugee resettlement, this is what we are talking about. When people are resettled in a third country. And only 1% of all world refugees will ever be resettled in a third country. Next slide. So just consider how many people are displaced in this world. More than 120 million. And when I did similar presentation just a couple of months ago, we were talking about 110 million. So huge numbers of people are being displaced around the world, and we really have a humanitarian crisis. Next question. How many have been registered as refugees with the United Nations? 44 million. Again, just in the last 2 months, the number increased. And in the last 10 years, the number tripled. The next question. What are the three countries that produce the biggest number of refugees? And they are Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine. A lot of refugees are under 18 children. How many do you think? What is the percentage of all refugees that are children? And the number is staggering. 50% of all refugees are children. More than 20 million children are displaced and were escaping persecution, sometimes on their own and sometimes with their parents and sometimes with just one parent. So let's look at where the refugees are coming from. Where are our clients from? These are all the refugee groups that come to Central Ohio. From Bhutan, we have ethnic Nepalis from Bhutan, and actually Central Ohio in Central Ohio, we have the biggest Bhutanese community in the whole of the United States. We also have refugees from the former Soviet Union, including Ukraine. And with the war in Ukraine, we continue to have people coming to the United States, escaping the war, and they receive humanitarian parole status. And we also continue seeing those with refugee status who are escaping persecution. We have refugees from Iraq, Afghanistan, Eritrea, Burma or Myanmar, Burundi, Rwanda, Ethiopia, Sudan, Somalia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Syria, and this list continues to grow, unfortunately, as we see more and more conflicts around the world. Just think about Sudan. And unfortunately, we don't pay too much attention on that in the media, but you know, this country is suffering unbelievable starvation and really on the brink of famine there due to the conflicts within the country. Let's look at some of the pictures from refugee camps. As I mentioned before, when refugees flee their country of origin, they go to the first country, very often neighboring country, and there are really two options of that for them. It's stay in a refugee camp if that refugee camp is available there, or become an urban refugee. In majority of countries, refugees don't have any legal rights. And it might be even dangerous to leave a refugee camp. And some spend decades, some spend lifetimes in these refugee camps. Just take a look at this. This is one of the biggest refugee camps. Next picture. This is how it might look. Decades in these conditions. Next picture. Next picture. Refugee camps are often overcrowded. They lack infrastructure. There are often internal and external violence, and all the temporary turned to permanent. It's also a breeding ground for chronic health conditions, mental health issues, and often local governments don't take any responsibility. These camps are usually funded by United Nations, by some donations from various governments, because again, those neighboring countries where refugees run to, they often lack infrastructure themselves. Next one. This is a look at a school in a refugee camp. And they do not necessarily have trained teachers. They very often, the schools are staffed by refugees themselves, maybe who had some education, maybe who had, more education, but this is how it might look like. Next one. And this is a look at the hospital, and this is some of the better ones. When I visited a refugee camp in Rwanda, that was the first time when I just couldn't hold the tears. Thousands of refugees with one volunteer doctor. And usually hospitals in refugee camps lack medical equipment, lack access. They might be staffed by volunteers from refugee camp, refugees themselves who lack the training, their high rates of infection, and obviously gaps in medical care. Next one. And so considering all of that, definitely refugees have certain barriers to integration. First of all, it's pre-immigration trauma, where people experienced violence, displacements, loss of security, loss of family, friends, social circle, and extreme poverty. It's often post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, and we see high suicide rates in certain communities. It's also poor health, because you've seen the hospitals. It definitely malnutrition and chronic infections and diseases. And then culture shock. Everybody who comes to another country experiences aspects of culture shock. Next one. In fact, almost all of us experienced culture shock in our lifetime when we move from middle school to high school, from city to city, from neighborhood to neighborhood, maybe starting a new job, a new culture in the office. But we can't overestimate the impact of culture shock for those who move from one country to another and have to deal with this new language, new environment, new culture. And usually people go through the first phase of fascination when they find everything in the new culture interesting and exciting. And they try new activities and they have a lot of energy and enthusiasm. And then the next phase is disenchantment, which actually starts pretty soon. When people start encountering problems, when, guess what, it takes longer to learn language, it takes longer to find a job, and the first job is not a dream job, and often qualifications and skills and education of those that come here might not be taken into account. So we here in the United States are dealing with brain waste and skill waste of those who come to our country. And so people start experiencing more complex problems, misunderstanding related to language, to culture, customs, and then they move to mental isolation when they started missing old culture, feeling like outsiders, may limit or avoid a contact with new culture and spend more or all of their time within their own culture group. And eventually, and this is what we do, our work is about to move people through these stages and bring them to adjustment and recovery. When their basic needs are met, routine is established, when they see improvement in language skills, when they have more with new culture. And eventually one would find it difficult to go back to the old culture. And now we really want to talk about what is it that we can do to welcome refugees, to open our doors and arms and our hearts, so that people will get as soon as possible to adjustment, recovery, and become a contributing citizens of this country. And with that, I want to introduce again Guadalupe Velasquez, Managing Director of Welcoming City. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Nadia. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you all for taking the time to listen to this webinar and learn about our emerging newcomer community, which really Franklin County has been receiving immigrants and refugees and migrants for over the past 25 years. And organically as a community, we have been welcoming. However, around 2006 and to today, really our city and county and municipalities have worked hard to be intentional about developing infrastructure and access to services, because we know that not everyone is situated in the same place. And while there are services that are available to each and every resident of Franklin County, not everybody receives that information or access on a timely basis. And so developing a welcoming plan was part of one of the objectives and priorities of the Welcoming City organization or social enterprise. Next slide, please. And so in 2022, we released a welcome plan with 5 priorities in mind. And this is through a lengthy process that we went through of developing a multi-sector advisory council, also working with the Franklin County New Americans Advisory Council, and having various focus groups on the various components that we would entail are part of the criteria to becoming a welcoming community, a community where there is a sense of belonging for all. And so the areas that we focused on was equitable workforce and economic development, education, connectedness. So having connected, safe, and healthy communities founded on the premise of social justice, equitable access to services, resources, and ESL classes, and civic engagement and government leadership development. Next slide. And so now we are in the phase of implementation of the plan. As you can see by the photo, it's a long-term plan. We have short-term and long-term plan. And so these particular priorities were set forth as our short-term plan. And so where we are is the commissioners, through the leadership of Commissioner Kevin Boyce, instilled, implemented, created a New Americans Advisory Council. We are in the process of expanding that council to be sure that we're including all the municipalities within Franklin County. And there we will work on the priorities set forth in the previous page. Also in collaboration with working with the Columbus Chamber of Commerce in the area of workforce development, we are releasing a hiring guide for employers this month. There you will find information about really the best ways and approaches, tips and tools. It will be a guide for employers to understand the best approach to reaching out to today's diverse workforce. In particular, the immigrant, refugee, migrant community, also referred to as internationally trained professionals. We know that Ohio has the largest number of unemployed and underemployed new Americans. And so the best thing that we can do is to work with employers and, again, our municipalities to identify innovative ways and processes to engage, enroll, hire, and retain that workforce. Nadia referred to on one of her slides brain waste. And so we have a very large number of doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, accountants who have more than one degree in their country of origin. But in coming to Ohio, find that their credentials did not transfer. And so we work with national partners and have been working with national partners and statewide partners to look at, again, innovative processes. So we will have not only tips and tools and objectives of how to move forward in hiring more internationally trained professionals, but also we have identified states throughout the nation and communities that are already implementing these practices. We also will begin hosting roundtable discussions with employers, again, as part of our welcoming plan implementation, to go through the guide and also to work on in real time strategies and approaches for employers. We also are working on combining the New Americans Forum that we have held for the past 7 years with the Diversity Inclusion Conference that is held by Franklin County Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And finally, again, as a result of what we heard from the community as it relates to having some type of virtual welcoming center, we'll be launching our welcome website where there will be resources and information that will help not only newcomers, but also anyone who wants to know how to reach out to the community and learn of their stories. So all that is still to come, and we'll be launching here in the next month as well. We thank you for allowing us to share what we're doing on the implementation welcome plan. And Nadia, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Guadalupe. So people often ask, what can I do now? How can I help? How can I engage? Well, you can definitely email to us, and we have a lot of opportunities for volunteers, conversation partners, tutors. We have a citizenship program where you can help us to do mock citizenship interviews with people, preparing them for that. We have victim services where we work with survivors of gender-based violence, and we're always looking for volunteers there. Also in our employment programs, and a welcoming city is also always looking for volunteers, especially now that we are in an implementation page of our welcoming plan. You can advocate, support refugees, call and write your representatives to make sure that we continue to resettle refugees, the most vulnerable people out there in the world, without home, without safety net, without security. And follow us on social media and learn about our refugees from Us Together and other refugee-involved agencies. And we have our handles here. Can you please? Okay, here it is. You can reach out to us. And the next slide. Thank you in so many languages. And we are open for questions.
Sharing now. There we go. Hi, welcome. Thank you, both of you, for that presentation. Very interesting facts. I know there's usually like a lot of confusion for people who don't understand all of these different types of immigration that happen to, the country. And I think it's important to kind of like inform people. I know there are a lot of, and I want to touch on something that I think contributes to all of these misinformation and misconceptions when it comes to refugees, asylees, immigrants. Because I'm an immigrant and I've been asked if I was a refugee from my country, and having to have that explanation of no, I just immigrated to this country. I've been asked if I was fleeing, violence or persecution. And I mean, obviously I wasn't, but this presentation felt really close to me for that reason. And also for one of the points that you touched on, and I will go back to misconceptions about, all of these, like people come to the country. But Guadalupe, you mentioned, a big part of, I'm so excited about the Welcoming City Plan and then what we are doing from this office, and very thankful to the commissioners and county administration for supporting these initiatives. Because I was one of those who, went to undergrad and then graduate program in another country, and then having to come here and then realizing that I had to go through a very long, expensive accreditation process to even be able to use my degrees, which was really sad, especially because, my minor is in translation and interpretation. So I was already like, I could be helping people if I actually had access to be able to help people with my degrees. So the fact that we are working as a county to make these services or these paths for people more accessible. I've met so many people who are doctors, lawyers, and nurses back in their country. And the fact that they are not able to do those, apply those here. So I feel very fortunate and like that we are able to join you and join us together in this plan. But and so that touches on the misconceptions of, who is coming into this country, right? I think that there's a lot of misinformation about the people who are refugees, asylees, and immigrants. And people they usually have one notion of what, they have this idea of what this person is without knowing the context and full story of who they are. So very thankful for the explanations as to what types of immigration paths people can have when they're coming into this country. But I touched on one, but what other misconceptions have you encountered when it comes to, just immigrants as a whole, refugees or asylum seekers? Would you want either or both of you want to touch on some of the misconceptions?
I'll share that the one that I heard often is the immigrants deplete the resources. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. There was an article, I want to say a month and a half ago in the Dispatch, where they shared the data of Franklin County. And in fact, Ohio and Franklin County has only grown due to migration, right? Migration of refugees, immigrants, and migrants. And so looking at what does that mean? How does that affect everyone? How does everyone benefit? Well, if you're working, you're paying taxes directly, right? That comes right out of your paycheck. Number two, you're buying goods and services. And we all know there's a tax on everything we purchase. So all that money is going into the system that pays for our roads, that pays for trash pickup, and so much more. The list goes on in terms of how we benefit from the tax base. But before I go on, I'll go ahead and, because I could just talk on this for the next, hour, but I will turn it over to Nadia.
Well, and continue on that. Obviously, there are some misconceptions about, all refugees come from poor countries. They are uneducated. They are illiterate. In 2015, and it's long overdue for us to do another study. 2015, we actually did a pretty big study on refugee contributions. And when we looked at education status at literacy level, surprise, surprise, it's exactly the same as those of everybody else in Ohio.
And I would say from that, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say we featured 15 refugees from various countries. And I remember one story where it was a Bhutanese person that said, that they learned to be human again. And going back to Nadia's PowerPoint, because that touched me, deeply when I read that. And I was curious, in terms of what exactly that meant. And when Nadia showed the pictures of refugee camps, and she said, so you're not a citizen of that country. So all that time you cannot vote. Technically, you can't work. I'm sure when there is need and desperation, one finds a way, right? Creativity is inspired. And necessity, takes a hold, and perseverance, and we find a way. However, not being able to contribute to their community or their society because they're in waiting, right? And so that also leads to the stereotype that immigrants are just living off the government, when in fact, back I would say it was in the definitely early 2000s, there was a study that showed specifically for Franklin County, there's a 1% difference between what we would call the host community, the Main Street community, or the receiving community. So anybody that was born here, is a U.S. citizen currently. Those are different ways to refer to the community. So versus an immigrant or refugee utilizing Franklin County services, 1% difference. So that is not the case. There are not people just coming here and living off of government funding. And there is, the more you talk with people, newcomers to our community, you will find that they want to contribute, because really the philosophy, when you grow up, I would say in almost any community, specific to ethnic backgrounds, that the perception, the culture is about the wholeness, right? The nucleus of the community. So that phrase, it takes a village, that is very much the culture of immigrant, refugees, and migrants. So it is not about the me, the self, the I. And so contributing also helps affirm, their identity and their cultural, their culture in what they do. Nadia?
And I also want specifically talk about Afghans and Ukrainians. I started my presentation with that the lines are blurred. Before, it was very clear divide. Refugees who were escaping persecution and immigrants who, people were talking about coming here for economic reasons, for education. And now the lines are blurred. And all of that in an individual story of every immigrant, regardless of the status that they have. And some probably should have had a refugee status, but it just so happened that the process didn't allow for that. And we are talking about Afghans. When Afghans started coming in our communities and we started resettling them, our bigger community assumed they were coming as refugees. Not the case. We evacuated 76,000 Afghans in a week and brought them to the United States and had to process them. US government could not process them for refugee status because they were already on a US soil. Asylum status takes months and years. And so they chose that, humanitarian parole status. Ukrainians, again, people are thinking that Ukrainians are coming as refugees. And yes, I mean, if it's not a refugee who runs from the war, then who is a refugee? But again, the government chose to utilize a different program, a sponsorship program, United for Ukraine, where people have to have local sponsors in order to come to the United States with a very temporary status, and now are worried every day what will happen to them. For Afghans, Are they going to go back and then be, in grave danger from Taliban? Or for Ukrainians, the war is still raging there. And so this system is not perfect, long overdue for a very, very deep dive, even with the best, really a best example of a refugee resettlement program. That was one of the best programs in the world, United States Refugee Resettlement Program. But we need to take a hard look at that as well, and probably work on reworking definition for refugees and asylees.
And let's not forget that many refugees, especially in war-torn countries where the U.S. was there, right? The military was there. The many individuals assisted, right? The military. You talked about being an interpreter. They were an interpreter. Sometimes, possibly, I don't want to use the word informant, but they helped and assisted our community, right? Not our community, our military. And so they are allies. And so we're not giving a handout by simply bringing them here to work. Again, we're talking about people of so many talents, and even just so even if we eliminated the economic impact, what we learned, what we know is there's the cultural aspect, right? The cultural impact, the social impact. We are all better for the diversity. Diversity does make our community stronger. And there's data that says that communities and cities that have diverse populations, right? That's inclusive diversity, right? Of all, when we talk about diversity, it encompassing all, definitions of diversity. Cities are thriving. Those cities are thriving, right? It's intellectual property and difference, that we need to contribute to innovation and creativity.
Yeah, and refugees are not resettled just in the United States. Refugees and migrants are resettled all over the world, but there is something in this soil, in this air. I traveled all around the world and I looked at different refugee programs, and some of them provide more benefits and some of them have more, bigger budget, but none of the countries does integration better than the United States. We don't see levels of integration around the world the same as we see in the United States. People, in spite of everything, people are integrated here. It's much higher rates. I myself came as a refugee to this country 30 years ago, and we still believe in American dream, and whether it exists or not. And because we believe, we achieve.
Right.
And then,
I think,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Guadalupe.
Well, I was going to say, and not all immigrants, not all undocumented immigrants are only Latino, right? So we know that 50% of all visas, and there's the visas for vacation, visas for student visas, work visas, 50% of all visas eventually are not renewed. And then that individual who's here is also undocumented. Also, we have immigrants that migrate from Asia and Africa and Haiti, Haiti. And so the misconception, and the kind of the negative rhetoric around our southern border, when we know, in fact, there are hundreds of thousands of Canadians that come through every single day for work, and then they cross the border back as well. And so there's not a lot of attention on the northern border, but rather the southern border. And again, looking at, let's just take the time to know who our neighbors are. We will learn more from each other. We will expand our minds and our cultural awareness, cultural competence of, what the world is really made up of, right?
Yeah, thank you for that, because we can just like start pulling in strings to what you just mentioned, right? I mean, there's this misconception about the right type of immigrant or the right type of refugee, right? And unfortunately, a lot of it is linked to racism, right? Discrimination. You see, I mean, it's the color of your skin, it's the country where you're from. So I really want to encourage people to just kind of walk away from that type of notion. There isn't
Yes.
a right type of immigrant, there isn't a right type of refugee, there isn't a right type of asylee. And also just put it out there. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of refugees maybe, or a lot of asylees probably would not choose to be in a situation where they have to be home from their like home country, right?
Yep.
I mean, I I chose to come into this country, and I'm very grateful for the opportunities that have been given to me living in this country already. But every day I think about home,
Yeah.
like
Yes.
yeah, every day I just, the food, the people, my culture, right? And
Yes.
even though we try to, integrate into the society and have communities and just bring more into, in particular the county, um, not all of us or not everyone came here because they chose to come here. They just
Exactly.
didn't have an option, right? It's either flee or your life, right? It's
Mhm.
either leave everything behind and having nothing. So really encourage people to just like invite everyone to just kind of rethink how you see refugees, asylees, and immigrants.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I'm so glad that Nadia, you were talking about integration, because it's important to talk about just kind of having people dive into our society. And when you're an immigrant, when you're a refugee, the only thing that you probably have left is your dignity. You left everything behind.
Yeah.
So the fact that you are able to come into a space that allows you to live with dignity, that like doesn't put any barriers to that, that says, I want you here. I know you probably didn't choose to come here, but now you're welcome, and we will make these spaces better, safer for you, in whatever capacity is that you need them. So that is a very important, like, just kind of looking at what we are trying to do here at the county with partners like you guys, with the strategic business plan for like welcoming cities, just trying to make the county a better place when it comes to, and I don't want to use the word melting pot because then that just kind of does away with people's individuality
A
and who
salad.
they are. A salad, exactly. Just make this county like a salad, right? Where we all stand out for who we are and what we bring into this space, but it still come together as a collective for, you know, making this county, making this country, making this city more prosperous, for everyone, right?
Yes. And
Absolutely.
I just want to say I have met so many immigrants that have had 2 and 3 degrees and came here, and started and do work in entry level jobs, and
Yeah.
um individuals that have been able to figure out how to start from the beginning, which we are really working diligently to really help to um sort of like smooth out that pathway, right? Because it is very involved and it's very intricate, and it's hopping from one website to the next, and one school to the next. um what I have seen is not only have then they aspired to become another graduate degree or PhD, um but I want to go back to when you're at an entry level job, you don't get benefits such as tuition reimbursement. And so people that do have it, it does help along the way, right? To go back to school, and just in the sort of like in the spirit of talking about, the struggle and the resilience. I have seen time and time again immigrants struggling to go back to school, and they do it with 2 or 3 jobs, and then again contribute back to the community. So keeping in mind in terms of employment, the categories that the levels of status that Nadia went over, they're employable, right? It's just a matter of learning the process, and we'll have a lot more information in the guide about that, as well as we look forward to hosting with one of our national partners a a workshop for internationally trained professionals in the fall. So if you're interested in that, please contact us, and or even you, Pedla, if it's directly to you or us here at Welcome in City, us together, we'd be happy to put you on the list so that you may participate if you're listening and are an internationally trained professional, or you know an internationally trained professional, so that we can have this workshop for you and aid in that pathway.
And I also want to say that we very often concentrate on challenges, but let's also celebrate the strengths, the achievements, the successes of our refugee and immigrant individuals and communities. We here in Central Ohio, where we are, our community is so diverse and have so much to offer to all of us. And it's really been a true pleasure watching it grow into a diverse community in the last 25 years.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Mhm.
Well, so thank you both, but since we're closing out, any last messages that you want to convey to the county, to the people that are watching us or will be watching, about why is this important? Why is it important to keep uplifting all of these voices, especially you both who are in a space where you're able to give a voice to people who sometimes are voiceless, right? So anything that you want to share?
You want to go first, Nadia?
Well, I think it's very important to engage refugees and immigrants, ask them to serve on a board, on a commission. We are capable and we can contribute a lot.
An African saying Ubuntu is "I am because you are." I am because you are. And in the end, we are all interconnected. So looking out for your neighbor, but is also looking out for yourself and your own community. We all benefit from the diversity that we have. So let's remember that and really get to know and explore our neighbors better.
Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
well, thank you both. Don't forget, everyone, Thursday, June 20th is World Refugee Day. And if you are able, please connect with us together with the Instagram, Facebook, or any to learn more about the work that they do and how you can volunteer and help other people who are coming into this country. There is a plethora. Go ahead, Guadalupe.
Well, and it's also Immigrant Heritage Month. And so we're
Yeah.
celebrating refugees, immigrants, migrants this month of June. And so, yes, explore. And thank you very much to Franklin County Commissioners for their progressive and intentional support in understanding the wholeness of diversity.
So this will be online, and then will be posted to Facebook also and to YouTube. And also Nadia was a guest with us today at the Commissioner's General Session, which will be also posted on Facebook and YouTube. So if you want to watch it, please go ahead and let's stay connected. And thank you both for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Pedla.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.